Welcome back to demonstration 5. This week we are looking at comparison of means and formatting tables in Word. This is the table that we are going to try to recreate this week. It comes from Engelhardt and Norris's 2003 book Rising Tide: Gender Equality and Cultural Change Around the World. And it portrays people's self-placement on the left-right ideology scale by gender in post-industrial societies, so comparing to similar countries and including Great Britain, between 1995 and 2001. We're not going to try to limit our range of years this week, so we will just use all of the pooled data from 1981 to 2014. For this week you will just need the Great Britain dataset. Now the first thing that we are going to need to do is to replace some of the words with numbers, because we're working with averages this week and it obviously can't average the word left or right. So the first thing that we need to do is to find our variable, which is the self-positioning variable numbered E033. So I'm just going to press find and I'm going to look for E033. There we go, self-positioning in political scale. We need to make sure that we select the column, because we only want it to replace words within this column. So select the column and open up your Find dialog again. And this time you want to go into the Replace tab. So you can do that by clicking up here and editing Find, Replace. You can press Ctrl F, whatever you want to do. So for the self-positioning scale, the way that it was measured is that 1 was left and 10 was right, and the respondents just positioned themselves according to where they thought they sat on that scale. So we want to find the word left and replace it with the number 1. Make sure that you have highlighted just the column of the variable we're interested in, and then click Replace All, and it should replace 168 words. Then we do the same thing where we find right and replace it with 10. And this should make 164 replacements. Now we're done with that. So we are now trying to recreate that table, which is giving us the average scores from this column, but using a pivot table. So I'm going to insert a new pivot table. You can of course use the one that you've already got. And in that pivot table, the first thing I want to do is to put sex in the columns. Sex is variable x001, so it's most of the way down because these are ordered basically alphabetically. So we've got sex 001. I'm going to put that into columns, and for the first part of the table I want to find age recoded into 3 intervals, because that's the variable that they used in Rising Tide. And that is variable x003r2. So not age recoded, but age recoded 3 intervals is the one that you want. Go ahead and put that into rows. And then in the values we want to put that left-right self-positioning, which was E033. So we scroll back up There it is, and we're going to put that into values. Now we need to filter our blinks as usual, so go into all of your drop down menus, filter out your blinks, and then we need to change the value field settings to summarize values by average, because this time we want it to calculate the means. Now, it's a bit awkward having so many decimal places, so let's go ahead and change that number to having 2 decimal places. That makes it look much simpler. And this basically corresponds to the first part of Norris and Inglehart's table. So we're not going to do the education variable this time. We're going to start with their age group variable, so we can see, here we go, that women had a mean of 5.12 in the age group of under 30s on a range from 1 to 10. So that says that women are ever so slightly right of centre, and men 5.26. Again, slightly more right of centre, but amazingly central. And how does this look for our data set? Well, we got a mean of 4.96 for women and 5.15 for men. So this is saying that respondents in Great Britain are actually slightly more to the left than the data set as a whole. We want to keep track of all of these sections as we create them, because we're going to assemble them into one big table like the one in the Norris and Inglehart table. So this is only this little section. As I said, we're not going to do education, but we will do most of the other ones. So what we want to do is to copy our table. We don't actually need either of the totals this time. I would recommend putting it in a fresh sheet. So you just click the plus button down there to add another sheet, and make sure that you paste values. You can delete the labels that say row and column labels. We don't care about those. And let's rename this so that it matches the terminology that Inglehart and Norris use. So we'll call it left-right ideology scale by gender. And we actually need an extra column here, so if you right click and insert another column so that we can put the category here, let's add another row in here as well. So we are going to put age. Okay. Now we're ready to do the next variable, which is occupational class. It shows up as employment status in our data set. But we have to remember, before we do anything else, that we clear the filters off. Oops, well, not that one. We can leave the one for sex. And then put age back. And this time we want X028 employment status to go in the rows. So again, I've got blanks here, but there are several that I want to rule out, because in their table they've only got paid work and looking after the home, which in this case would be housewife. So we will select full-time, housewife, part-time, and self-employed. And we'll leave everything else out. And then we need to group together full-time, hold down Control, or command in the case of Max, part-time, and self-employed. And in the Analyze tab for our pivot table, press Group Selection. So Group 1, again, if we use the same terminology as Engelhardt and Norris, and let's collapse those fields. So you have paid work and you have housewife, which they called looking after home. And then we want to copy over those values and paste them into our table, leaving a one-row gap so that we can put the category label, which is work status. So here we can see that actually men who are looking after the home are left of center, which maybe wouldn't be surprising because men who are staying at home we would expect to be more on the liberal end of the spectrum, because it's not a traditional gender value for men to be looking after the home. Okay, so now we need to go back to our pivot table, and again we need to clear the filters and make sure that you clear the filter from the main variable as well, because we grouped them. And then put them back. And now we want occupational class, which is X046 socioeconomic status. This is the common way of dividing it up in the UK using the ABCDE system. Again, let's just filter out our blanks, but otherwise we don't need to group or filter anything else. And we can copy these over and paste values. And Engelhardt and Norris have called this R's occupational class. We're going to make this column a little bit wider so that we can actually see our labels better. We go back to our pivot table again, clear your filters, and put the variable back. And this time we want marital status, which is X007. If you haven't noticed a pattern about the numbering of the variables yet, it's that the demographic variables are numbered starting with X. Again, we want to filter out the blanks, and we can copy and paste. So we've got values and marital status. Again, remove your filters, put that back. Then we want children, which in this one is X011. How many do you have? Not terribly helpful because it doesn't say children, but that's what it's asking. Now this is done by numbers. I don't know how you can not know how many children you have, but let's take out the don't know and the blank. And Engelhardt and Norris are only interested in whether they've got no children or at least one. So we need to group together 1 through 8. And then we can collapse these and we can rename them no children and at least one child. Again, we can copy and paste. Give it a category name. And we've got 2 more variables to do. So the next one is religiosity. And as usual, we need to clear filters and make sure we clear them from both variables. And put them back. And we want to look at religious services attendance, which is F028. The variables starting with F are the variables about faith. Okay, so E, F028. How often do you attend religious services? This time we need to do a bunch of filtering and a little bit of grouping, because they only use two categories: never attend and attend service every week. So first of all, we want more than once a week, never, practically never, and once a week. And we're going to need to combine once a week and more than once a week. So if you hold down Control and select them both, go into Analyze and Group Selection, and we can name our groups and collapse them, and again we copy and paste and call this religiosity. The final one is going to be religion. So once again we clear our filters from both versions of our religious services attendance variables, and then we want religious denomination, which is F025. This time we are just looking for Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Jewish and Muslim. So let's deselect that. So let's see, we've got Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Jewish and Muslim. And we can copy and paste. Now we have almost completed Engelhardt and Norris's table, excepting a couple of variables. So we didn't do the education variable and we didn't do the gender equality variable because those were ones that they had calculated. So it would be more difficult for us to find the same answers. But what they've got as well here is the diff column. Now what they've done is they've made it so that negative numbers mean that women are more conservative than men, because the general hypothesis is that men will be more conservative on most of these things than women. So we are going to create our own calculated column with our new table. And just like them, we'll name it diff for difference. All you need to do to create this calculation is press equals and then click so that it's male minus female. So you just click on the boxes that you want it to subtract. And then click back on that cell, hover over the bottom right corner so that you get the cross symbol, click and drag all the way down. What that does is it fills it in with the same formula, but it adapts it so that you see this one is looking at the next row. Isn't that clever? Okay, then we just need to delete the numbers that are popping up in the category rows because they don't actually represent anything. So there we go, and we have now duplicated the table. So we're now going to format that in Word, and we'll then talk our way through the interpretation of this table. I'm going to copy this. I'm actually not going to copy the table label, and I'll show you why in just a moment. And then I'm going to paste it into Word. Now the first thing I want to do is to click on the table, go over into Layout and click View Grid Lines. This just allows us to see where the borders of the cells are without it printing those borders. Now the standard in academic publishing, and as you'll see in that table from Engelhardt and Norris, is to have one solid line across the top, one solid line underneath the top row, and one solid line at the bottom, and not to use any other lines unless it's absolutely necessary to make it clear. So let's do that first. If you click on Draw Table, and you just click and come across and make sure that it's showing that thick line, because otherwise it's actually going to draw you a new row in the table. So we need one line across the top, we need one line underneath our categories, and we need one line across the bottom. Then click Draw Table to turn that off again. You can also do this using the Design tab. So if we select the rows that you want to adapt, I don't know why it's not highlighting that middle one, and you click on Borders, and you can just click Bottom Border, Top Border. Whichever way you find easier is fine. So back in Layout, we want to merge the cells that aren't already merged so that age, work status, occupational class, and so on actually extend across. And the reason why is because we want to be able to move this indent over. So you just hover over it until it shows you that two-way arrow, click and drag. The final things we want to do are to change our categories into bold, and then our table needs a nice label. So in References, go to Insert Caption. It will automatically write Table 1, and then we'll call it Left-Right Ideology by Gender in Great Britain 1981 to 2014. Press OK. Now the nice thing about this is that if you have more than one table, it will automatically update your table number for you. But this formatting is a bit ugly. That's where you want to look at styles. So if you click that drop down menu there in Styles, it shows you that it has formatted as caption, but I don't like that formatting. So I'm going to right click on that formatting, press Modify. I want to make it black, I want to make it a normal size, and instead of italics I want it to be bold. And then I press OK. The final thing that I need to do is to put my source information, which when you're talking about data, you would put the dataset name. So WVS, EVS, pooled data, 1981 to 2014. And there you have your first table. We can go ahead and turn those grid lines back off. So going back to the Table Tools, Layout, and View Grid Lines. And you have a professional looking table. So let's talk through those findings a little bit. We've got a negative difference here, although very small, between male and female. So women who are 50 years and older are slightly more conservative than men, but that difference is so small that it looks like it would be within the margin of error. Then we already talked about how men looking after the home are more liberal than women. And we can see that divorced women are more conservative, as well as separated and widowed, which is very interesting. So women who are cohabiting, married, or single, never married, are more liberal than men. And the children, the men are more conservative consistently, but we can see that if we compare the women to each other, that women with at least one child, as well as men with at least one child, are more conservative than those who have no children, which actually supports the theoretical findings that people become more conservative when they have children because it activates their sense of physical security and survival values. Then again, with attending service every week versus never, as we would expect, those who attend service every week are somewhat more conservative than those who attend service never. And we can see that Muslim women come up as being more liberal than Muslim men, and Orthodox women come up as more liberal than the men. Or, sorry, more conservative, I meant to say on both of those. So Muslim women are more conservative than Muslim men, and Orthodox women are more conservative than Orthodox men. We can see that the Jewish women, followed by the Roman Catholics, are the least conservative amongst the women. And for men, it's the Orthodox men, and there's not another category that's very close, although Muslim actually comes up in second place here. So you have now learned how to look at means. So these are the averages on that 1 to 10 scale for lots of different characteristics. And you'll just make another one of these tables to complete the quiz exercise for this week.